So trading the under and over goal markets can be done in a certain way, but there is one metric that's the most key and important aspect of this particular market from a trading perspective. So what is it, and how should we really be trading over and under goal markets on Betfair? If you're interested in learning to trade on Betfair, then visit the BetAngel Academy, where you have detailed, structured Betfair trading courses. Or why not visit our website, where you can download a free trial of BetAngel Professional, but also visit the forum, where you can get detailed images, examples, and downloadable files. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released. So I first wrote about over-under goal markets on Betfair a very long time ago. It could have been probably as early as 2005, 2006, somewhere around there, I think, perhaps, can't quite remember. I'll see if I can dig up the article that I wrote, because I did talk about the concept probably 15 years ago or so. Maybe not quite as long as that, but as you can judge, it was a long time ago. But it's funny because when you look at the markets, underlying core strategies within markets tend to remain the same over time. But very often what you find is people's desire to merchandise these particular strategies leads them to add in other elements to it. So it's sort of like, oh, you know, we like to back under 2.5 goals and trade out after 20 minutes. If this is happening, if the odds on the match odds are this, and if that's the case, and this is the situation, and you're in conjunction with Uranus. And it gets very complicated. But the fact is, there's a simple underlying metric within over and under goal markets that very clearly defines exactly if you're going to be profitable over the long term or not. You know, you can throw away all of the other sort of junk that goes with it. And if you can understand this metric and judge it and judge your strategy by this metric, then you will determine your long-term payoff. So of course the question is, what is this metric? Well, essentially you're looking obviously at the number of goals that are going to be scored within the match, but more importantly when they're likely to be scored. So this will vary quite dramatically depending upon the type of match that you're looking at. So if you imagine a team at the top of the league playing a team at the bottom of the league, you would imagine that there are probably going to be a few more goals. So when you look at a football match, excluding extra time and so on, you've got 90 minutes for all of those situations to play out. So effectively what you're doing is you're deciding how many goals are going to go in this particular match, you're shoving them into 90 minutes and then dividing them up. Now the interesting thing is when you look at football, it generally is incredibly variable, and the distribution of goals is a little bit random, but not completely, because obviously, you know, scoring in the first minute is unlikely. But you know, as you progress through the match, then you're more sort of likely to be able to get a point at which a goal is more likely to be scored. So I actually came up with a formula that works this out. You type in a couple of variables, you press a button, and it goes, this is the average time of the goal in this particular match. And you're sort of thinking, hey Peter, I'd love to get hold of that. Well, it's pretty much encapsulated within Soccer Mystic. So we'll go on and have a look at that in a second so you can understand how that statistic comes out of the woodwork. I'm not going to go into detail on the maths because it's a little bit complicated and boring, but it can be done basically. You can work out the average time of the first goal. But the problem that you face is there's quite a wide distribution. So the average goal may arrive at a certain point within the match, but it's like plus or minus 20 minutes. And that's where the sort of the semi-randomness of football comes through. It's such a variable outcome that just strange things that can happen. So you'll often hear me say, you know, outsiders score more often than you think. And that is because of the nature of football. You know, despite the fact that they don't have a good chance of winning the match, doesn't mean that they're not going to score first. It could just be a miss kick, a bad clearance, the goalkeeper fouls up, or, you know, many things can happen that create that first goal within a market. However, you do find that there are consistent themes that run through a particular market. So for example, if you pick, I'm not going to name a team on this video because I want it to have some longevity, but for example, I can name teams now in the Premier League that have an above average scoring rate. So what does an above average scoring rate mean? Well, it means that they score more goals generally during a match. And if you think about it, if a team is going to score 1 goal in a football match, then it could be on 1 minute, it could be on 90, but on average it will probably be around 45 minutes because, you know, that's the distribution of goals. Now, it's not quite like that. I've really oversimplified that. There are lots of little biases that occur within the match. But essentially now, let's say that we've got 3 goals. So you can see that 3 goals distributed across the match would probably be around sort of 30 minutes. Again, it's not that simple. But can you see, basically, as we increase the number of goals, the interval between goals decreases. So if we've got 1 goal in a match, the interval is this big. If we've got 2 goals in a match, the interval is that big. And if we've got 3 goals in a match, the interval is that big. And what we mean by interval is if you back under 2.5 goals, then you're hoping that the price will come down and down and down and down, and then a goal comes and the price spikes up. If you can actually get your trade in and out during that interval, whether you're just scalping or whether you've got a longer term trade, then basically you will make money. So this comes back to this key principle of what is the most important metric when you're trading under 2.5 goals. And really, in essence, it's that time of those goals. And the time of the goals will be dictated in the very long term by the interval that is expected between them. And the interval that's expected between them is determined by how many goals are going to be scored in a match. So if you spend all of your time and effort looking at the number of goals that are likely to be scored, and when those goals are likely to be scored, that will give you an edge within the market. That will determine your long-term payoff. Now, if you don't do that and you just follow some blind strategy, then you'll probably make money repeatedly or go through spells of making money. But over the long term, it will be that defines whether you're profitable or not. So if you invest all your time, energy and effort into working out those metrics, that will significantly help you profit in any of these particular markets, whether it's 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, and so on. Now, the concept is a little bit difficult. You may be listening to this and thinking, what are you going on about? So it may be a little bit difficult to grasp. But if I fire up BetAngel and we have a look at Soccer Mystic, you can have a look at individual matches and it will tell you what the market is thinking. So if we go into BetAngel, fire up Soccer Mystic, you can actually plot out what the market is thinking for that individual match and you can work out those individuals. So without any hesitation, let's go in and have a look at BetAngel and Soccer Mystic and encapsulate exactly what I've just been talking about. So we're going to look at some markets that are taking place this evening, and we'll learn from these markets what our true objective is within them. We can look at them individually, and because there's a range of matches going off tonight, it will help us understand how different things affect the way that the match is likely to play out. So if I click on Guardian, this is the way that we're going to bring in all of these markets, and what I've done is created some filters here. So you can see at the top here I've got big volume matches, and this basically lists all of the big volume matches that it can see within the market tree at this particular moment in time. And we can actually narrow that down as well, or display information in a number of ways. If you've never used filters, you should edit an existing filter to suit or create one completely brand new. But you can see here there's an awful lot that you can do, and this one is listing out all of the over-under markets that are available within this particular day or a couple of days here. In fact, because it says today's matches, I obviously haven't told it just to look at today, and maybe I should go back and edit that. But if we look at today's over and under markets, you can see there they all are. So now we need to add them to Guardian. So if I right click here, do select all markets, right click again and add selections to Guardian, they will populate over there. Now Olympiacos and Spurs is currently underway, and it's 1-2 at half time. So obviously that market is settled, so we'll just delete that. But you can see all of the other markets are up and running here. So if we just quickly flick through each of these here, you can see Shakhtar and Man City. What I'm going to do is just pull that up so it's a little bit clearer, and we can blow it up to make it a bigger size. But you can see here over 2.5 goals is 159, 157 in the next match. So you can immediately tell that PSG against Real Madrid, they're basically saying there's an equal chance of both of those matches having a similar number of goals, so an equal number of goals in both those matches. And in fact, you can see that in Leverkusen and Lokomotiv Moscow, Atletico against Juve. They're expecting that to be a tight match, and Bayern Munich against is going to be full of goals, so you'd expect that between two mismatched teams. And as Dinamo Zagreb and Atalanta, looks like there's an equal chance of over or under 2.5 goals. So you can tell immediately from that the market is forecasting about 2.5 goals or thereabouts. So let's start actually then with Dinamo Zagreb and Atalanta, and we'll have a look at that particular market. So what I'm going to do here is go to Soccer Mystic. We can dig around in this match and have a look at exactly what we're going to see, or what we're likely to see. So if we look basically at this particular curve, you can see I've set up Soccer Mystic. I'm not displaying the probability chart, I'm displaying odds, so I'm limiting them to 25 just to keep it nice and neat within the graph that you see on the right here. And I'm displaying the under 2.5 goal market. So when the match kicks off, it'll be about 208, and if there are no goals, then the price comes down and down and down until it reaches 101 much later within the match. So if you want to profit on that, then you're going to want to trade in here or at some point within the match, and then trade out as that goes in your favor. Now we do have an over and under scenario indicator, which I shall pop up on the screen over here, but this basically shortcuts it very quickly so that you can actually go into the market and just sort of say, I've got £100, what is the potential profit 15 minutes from now, and that will give you a clue as to how much potential profit there is in 15 minutes time. Or you could say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you can see it's giving you scenarios here if there are no goals or there are goals that are scored from there. So the longer the time we push out, then the more likely it is that we will profit. But to understand why and how that influences what you're going to do and what your true objective is, we need to go back to the over-under probability graph. So it's displaying the odds here, and you can see the odds decline as the match progresses until they go to 101, because it's getting more and more certain, if there are no goals, that it's going to be under 2.5 goals. So what is your objective here? Well, if you're trading unders, then if I start fiddling around with the numbers here, if we sort of say, okay, there's a goal after 10 minutes, it's doing the same as we've done over here, but we're now actually plotting the data. We're actually having a good look at the data to understand how it's going to influence the result of the match. So you can see if there's a goal after 10 minutes and we're backing unders, oops, that's a bit of a problem. But if we lengthen that time scale and we do 20 minutes, and I'll refresh in a second, you can see it's slightly less of a problem, because we start at sort of 204-ish and the price spikes out. So let's have a check here. The price is going to go out somewhere in the region of 272. So if we do 30 minutes, then you can see the gap between where we started. So if I just click here and then click here, you can see it calculates the differential for you. So you can see at around 30 minutes, if there's a goal, the odds would have changed negatively against us. From the start of the match, we started at 206-ish. We're getting out at about 224-ish, and therefore we're going to lose about 18 ticks profit in there. So you can see if there's a goal after 30 minutes, that more or less gets us to break even. So if we do like 34 minutes, let's have a guess and see where we end up after 34 minutes. So you can see, let's have a look. Yeah, we're more or less about at the entry point at 34 minutes. So if you're backing unders, you're basically saying that if you back unders at the start of the match at sort of just short of 210, then if there's no goal within the first 34 minutes, then you will probably profit. And if there is a goal that comes after that particular period, then you'll probably still be in profit. So really, when we're looking at Dinamo Zagreb and Atalanta, if you're trading under 2.5 goals and you want to profit from under 2.5 goals, you're basically saying, is there going to be a goal within inside 34 minutes? That's in essence what you're doing when you're looking at this particular scenario. So if we change this to 1.5 goals, can you see how this changes dramatically? So if we're backing under 1.5 goals, we're basically looking at this and we're sort of saying, well, you know what, it's going to be probably about half time before we could get away with a profitable trade here if we back before the match starts and trade out at some point in play. Now, of course, you could develop a strategy that sort of says, and we're going to trade out after 10 minutes, because suddenly you reframe the whole thing from there. So if we say that there was a goal after 15 minutes, can you see the impact that that has? A goal after 10 minutes, you can see what impact that has. But basically, the longer and longer you push that window out, then basically the more chance you've got of getting away with it. So effectively what you're saying here is you're not basically, lots of people focus on, this setup, that setup, these odds, this type of scenario, and therefore, this is what I'm going to do. But if you boil down exactly what your objective is, if you're working on unders, you're basically saying that you think that there's going to be a goal inside 45 minutes. So you put all your energy, effort, and focus into trying to work out if you think that's likely to happen. Now, you can do all of that work before the match starts, but also when the match gets underway, that should either reinforce your opinion or deny it. You should basically sort of say, well, this is working, everything's as I expected, everything's looking good. Or you should say, oh, I'm a bit nervous here, there are lots of things going on that lead me to believe that that isn't going to be the case. And of course, as you change the scenario, so if we do over 1.5 goals, you can see that basically that window of opportunity, we need a goal not to be scored for a period of time. If we basically do under 3.5 goals, you can basically see that you need a lot of early goals in order for that not to be true. So if we go into this market and start sort of throwing in a few early goals, let's put that one to 25 and that one to 55, and we'll see how that scenario plays out. So yeah, you can see here basically the scenario you've got here is that you obviously don't want that first goal to come inside that 34 minutes, but if it does come, then you've got a little period of time here before you get back to break even, and then you can choose to ride that all the way down. But then you're playing another game here. You're basically saying, if there's a goal between here and there, in other words, if we're looking at time one was basically that in about half an hour basically between a goal being scored after 25 minutes to 55 minutes, you can see that you've got a half an hour window there where you may be able to hold on to your position until that second goal comes. But you're obviously taking a little bit more risk. But can you see here how really your objective isn't that you're timing into the market itself? It isn't the sort of the setup, like a certain number of set of odds on the match beforehand or whatever, because they're all intertwined. You're basically saying, is there going to be a goal within this period? You're creating a window, you're framing a window here of half an hour where you're sort of saying, I'm on under 3.5 goals. A goal has gone in after 25 minutes. Do I think that there's going to be another goal in the next half an hour? So based upon what's going on the field of play, you can make that judgment at that particular point, or you can sort of say, well, you know what, I'm going to cut out my position here. So yeah, we're looking at a match here where it's sort of forecasting around 2.5 goals because we saw it as evens in the market. If we look at over and under, you can see it's basically evens for over or under 2.5 goals. It's split. So let's have a look at another match and try and understand specifically sort of what we see within that match. So looking at Bayern München versus Kröger, and this scenario is a bit different because in the match that we looked at previously it was evens for over and under 2.5 goals, and because it's Bayern Munich and they're going to win 6-0 or something, that's basically sort of starting at a much higher price because it's much less likely. Not impossible, but it's much less likely. If you go to the correct score market, you can actually get a good proxy for the number of goals that are likely to be scored in the match by looking at 0-0, because 0-0 is effectively no goals. So if you want a match that's going to have plenty of goals, you do not no goals effectively, if you understand where I'm coming from. You may not, but that's the way that I'm thinking about it. So you can see here the chance of there being no goals in this match is quite small. It's less than 2%, which is pretty obvious really. But if we look at how this influences how many goals we think could be in this match, let's type in 34 minutes again here, working on the unders, and we'll see what occurs there. So you can see basically if we backed at 2.4 and the price is coming down and coming down and coming down, and there was a goal at 34 minutes, can you see that the odds would go back out again, but not significantly? So what is this actually saying to us in terms of what we can expect from this match? So if we do a goal after 25 minutes, you can see, oh, hold on a second here, look, we're a little bit closer here, so let's trim that again. 23, yeah, so 23, 24 minutes. 20, let's have a look, yeah, 24 minutes is probably about there. So what this is actually telling you is it's saying the market thinks that there will be a goal on average. If this match was played 100 times, the average time of that first goal would be 24 minutes, a full 10 minutes before the other match that we were looking at. So you can see here that basically by default this is giving you an idea of how many goals it thinks there will be likely within this particular match. So if we go in here and type in something that's double that value, there we go, and if we go back in again and we type in, yeah, so that was fairly spot on last time, but can you see how I was playing around and it was influencing what we're seeing from here? So can you effectively see what we're looking at here? Can you see it's sort of going spike 1, spike 2, spike 3, and we never quite get to the spike 4. So in essence, what the market is telling you on this particular match is there are going to be 3 and a bit goals on average. If this match was played 100 times, you'd get an average of about 3.5 goals or so on. So if we skip back to the previous market that we're looking at, we'll do the same thing on there, and we'll see what the outcome of messing around on there is, and that will give us an insight into what we expect to see in that market. So let's skip back and have a look at that prior market. So looking at Dinamo Zagreb and Atalanta, and we can go through the same sort of sequence here. You can see I've changed the number of target goals to 2.5, and you can see basically that it sort of decays away 1, decays away 2, and we never quite get to the other one. So we sort of, if you look at the width of these, so we're looking at that there, 30 something odd minutes, 34 odd minutes between, of course, because I've just typed it in up there, haven't I? About 34 minutes between each of those particular goals, but you can see that more or less goes back to that particular starting point from there. So that's implying that this match has 2.5 goals, and of course you can see that from the odds. That sort of more or less tells you. But when you're looking at the over and under 2.5 goal market, you may not know what those odds are discounting, but if you fire up Soccer Mystic and you go in and you look at those individual markets, and then you go through this exercise, this will give you an idea basically of how many goals there are likely to be in the match. And from that perspective, what we're talking about is the market's generally efficient. Most people who are pricing these markets generally know what they're doing, and therefore when you're active and in these markets, you need to understand, if you're going to get value either from trading or betting, you need to understand exactly what is being discounted into the price. So we can see here with a nice practical example, because the odds are just above evens, it's basically saying that there are going to be slightly less than 2.5 goals, but we can actually visualize that, look at it, and we can calculate the gap between those particular goals. So when we're looking at this particular match, we're not sort of saying, are they going to be under 2.5 goals in total, because we just have an outright bet. We could go in there and place a bet directly on that. But when you're actively trading, what we're going to say here is there going to be a goal inside the next 34 minutes? And if there is, will there be 2 goals inside the next 68? And so on. Because that, in essence, is going to be how you're going to be profitable. You've got to make your judgment as a trader on what you can see before the match, what you can see during the match, and that creates and frames the trade for you, which allows you to make that particular judgment. And then, of course, if you get a goal that comes in a little bit earlier, so say there's a goal on 34 minutes and then 38, all of a sudden that's going to radically change the way that you've actively trade the market, and you'll see that in fact, a goal coming so quickly is going to leave you a fairly long time to get back into the particular match. But you can see again that that's effectively telling you is there going to be another goal before 68 minutes, because if there is, then you may as well dump your position. But if you don't think that there is, then the price will eventually retrace back to your entry point. So yeah, over under 2.5 goal markets are quite interesting, but what they're discounting, as the name suggests, is the number of goals within the match. But that's difficult to visualize with the odds, but when you fire it up on Soccer Mystic, you can see it very clearly. So there you go. Hopefully that gives you a clue as to what I was talking about before we switched over to BetAngel itself. But in essence, you're looking at that window and you're basically saying, is a goal going to be scored or not be scored within that window? Because if you're backing unders, you don't want a goal to be scored. If you're backing overs, then you want a goal to be scored in that particular period. But you have to have some underlying rationale as to why you think that is going to take place. So if the market is sort of pricing in 3-ish goals, you have to sort of say, well, you know what? This isn't a match that's going to have 3 goals. It's going to be closer to 2 than it is to 3. And that's where your profit and your edge will come out within the market. Or it could be a team that's in a 2-legged contest and they need to score an away goal, and therefore you knock up your potential goal count a little bit. Or perhaps it could be 2 teams that just can't seem to score for love nor money, and therefore you'd knock it down a little bit, and therefore the window widens a little bit and changes the way that you would do your particular trade. So of course, you do all of that work before the match gets underway. You look at what the market's telling you, you make your own judgment on whether you think that is correct or not. But then of course, when the market goes in play, then everything changes around again, because if the match is really, really open, that window is going to be shortening by the minute. If there are loads of shots and the ball's loose and both teams are attacking each other and they're going to win 16-15 if it needs to be, then that window just narrows dramatically. So at that point you have to sort of think, whoops, got this wrong, I'm going to get out. Or you adjust your trade according to what you think, or maybe you just wait for that match to start before you start to make a judgment on how things are going to pan out from there. So, if the match is dead and the 2 teams are very tetchy and holding on to the ball and just passing it around a lot and nobody's really committing anybody forward, then your window opens and your strategy changes. But yeah, in essence, when you're looking at over and under goal markets, if you use BetAngel, you can get a much better estimation as to what that window is, how many goals are likely to be within the match, and that will allow you to form a much better judgment on whether you want to do your trade. And ultimately, that's what you need to do if you're going to be profitable in the long term.